Our first presenter is Miss Israa Osman, and she's going to present Rethinking Assessment in the New Normal. And a few words about Miss Israa. She has 13 years of teaching experience, having taught students in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And she holds a TEFL and a diploma in teacher training from London Teacher Training College, and a diploma from Pathways course from IH London and the Cambridge English Teaching course. She has taught 3 years. She has 3 years of teacher training experience with reputable institutes such as the Cambridge International Assessment and NIST. Isra's extensive experience teaching students of diverse backgrounds in many countries has helped her develop emphatic approach to teaching. She's currently the founder of Teach Ojen for Educational Transformation Services. Welcome, Israa. And are you ready to present now?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Shazia, very much. So let's start. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here to our session today. Today, we're going to look at online assessment in a new way from a different angle. So we will start with first of all, thanking Educational Webinar Jam for giving me this opportunity. On behalf of Teachagin, also would like to thank you all for coming to our session. Now, today we are going to take a look at a few points regarding rethinking assessment. The first one would be the opportunities versus the challenges in online assessment, purposes and types of assessments, and the academic challenges that we may have. Designing online assessments, so we will think of brainstorming, familiarizing, planning, checking, and executing. We will see how you can prepare your students for online assessment, avoiding plagiarism and cheating. And we will also look for alternatives for traditional tests. Creative and engaging tech tools also will be introduced to use in online assessment. So let's start. Now, first of all, I'd like you to scan this QR code if you can, and using your phone cameras, and just tell us a bit about yourself. I'd like to know my audience, where are they from, and just your name maybe, and where you're from. This is actually when you scan it, you will see a Padlet that shows you the map of the world. So just check where you're from or where are you now, and let us know a little bit about you. You should see this by now. So if you cannot scan the QR code, I'm going to simply copy and paste the link for you and put it in the chat pod. Okay. So you can simply click on the plus sign here, and you can search your place and type a little bit about yourself. Okay, so I can see I have someone from Medina and Someone from Saudi Arabia, but no names. Someone from the Philippines, Miss Ivy. Hello, Miss Ivy. From Medina, Mr. Maruf, welcome. Okay, great. This is actually a great tool that you can use with your students. If you have international students, you can use it as an icebreaker, for example. We have Miss Libert from Belgium. Welcome. Okay, great. You don't have to write a lot, just your name, maybe, and just a few words about yourself. Okay. So welcome everyone. Now we are going to get back to our session, and let's take a look at some facts. Now, according to a survey done by the UNESCO in October 2020, this survey with 118 ministries of education worldwide have found the impact that the COVID had on education as follows. More than 55% of the respondent countries postponed or rescheduled high-stakes examinations, while more than 30% of respondent countries are planning to assess primary students when schools reopen, which means that they are not assessing them right now during online classes. About 10% of the respondent countries reported having canceled their examinations altogether. Now, when you look at these numbers here, this is an important and a very dangerous indicator that online education is not assessed properly. Most schools worldwide are just waiting for schools to reopen so that they can assess their students face to face, which means that they are not equipped with the tools that they can assess their students with online. This is why it's important that we share our knowledge as much as we can when it comes to online assessment. But first of all, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of assessment? When you are assessing a student, what are you assessing him or her for? So we have three types of assessment. The first one is assessment as learning, and this is when the process of assessment itself is teaching new skills to your students. The assessment of learning, which what the students can do with the information that they have, and the assessment for learning, which is here what the teacher should do in response when she assesses the student. So this is the assessment that the teacher needs to do in order to start developing new techniques, for example, or new strategies in order to deliver the information to their students properly. Then we will go to the types of assessment. Now, the types of this assessment, I think most of us know them, which are diagnostic, which comes before the process of learning to know where your student's at right now. Then we have the formative assessment, which is the assessment during the process of learning. Let's say you are teaching them a certain unit or a certain lesson, let's say the present simple tense, and you want to know how much they got from the lesson. So you do the assessment during learning. And the summative assessment, which is at the end, where you finish your learning process and then you are giving your student the assessment in order to know how much they got from the information that you have already given to them. Okay. Now, if we take a look here, this is another QR code, and I want you to put your thoughts in this one. So if you can scan the QR code, it will take you to another Padlet. And I'm gonna copy and paste the link again for you. in the chat pod, so you can simply click on it and it will open to you. So it's in the chat pod now. I want you to think of those questions briefly, okay, just for a minute or two, and let me know. Do you think assessment is harder during virtual learning? So I want you to think of yourself as a teacher or as an educator. Do you think assessment is harder during virtual learning? Why or why not? Should students know what they are assessed for before or after assessment? And can you think of other sources of assessment rather than you, rather than the teacher? Can your students be assessed without you in the process? Okay, so I can see some answers going on now. Perfect. Okay. So I got some answers for the first question. You think assessment is harder during virtual learning? Yes, because it's easy to copy or cheat in the exams. Very good point. Yes, for fear of security. So the same idea. Students are not autonomous learners and need constant scaffolding. Okay, that's another point. That's a very important point, actually. Why aren't our students autonomous learners? Actually, this can be a whole other session. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. Any other answers for questions 2 and 3? Now, the second question says, should they know what they're assessed for before or after the assessment? That's the question. It's not a yes or no question. It's either before or after. Okay. Okay, very good. Now, what about thinking of other sources of assessment rather than the teacher? Have you ever thought of that? So just something else rather than the teacher asking the students about a certain information. Okay. Online platforms, peer review and feedback. Very nice. Yes, very good idea. Yes, exactly. Okay, my focus during this pandemic was more around the ownership of the learning process of the student. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. You got very good points that we are going to discuss later on in our presentation. So let's take a look at the online assessment and the opportunities that you can find there and what are the concerns as well that you might have. And let's see if they match the concerns that you had on Padlet earlier. So the opportunities that you can have from online assessments are accessibility and flexibility. Now, students can take the exams at their own homes at the time that they think that they are ready. You can also give them a detailed feedback. Imagine when you were in a class of 15, 20, 25 students, how would you give your feedback to your students after the assessment? It was quite brief, right? But right now you have the time to give them detailed feedback. This can be either through for example, a word, if they had a writing assessment, you will write in details in the comments, for example, on the Word document or maybe in an email or something, rather than just in the classroom where you will simply give the student 2-3 sentences as a feedback. Collaborative learning, actually, online assessment can be done as collaborative learning. It doesn't have to be individual assessment. Not all assessments should be done individually. It can be done collaboratively as well. Now, the concerns. I want you to look at those two lists of concerns carefully and tell me which one can be the concerns for teachers and which one can be the concerns for students. The first list is of concerns: academic integrity, high workload, student isolation, and technical issues. While the second list is equity and fairness, technical issues, differing technical abilities, less opportunity to clarify the assignment guidelines. So which list of these lists are for the teacher? The one on the left or the one on the right? Teacher's concerns. Both are teachers? It could be. But when these researches, actually those results, I got them from researches that were done in schools earlier. Okay, you can see the resources below. Okay, actually, yes, Mr. Shadi, it's the one on the left. The academic integrity. Actually, this is what you just said: avoiding cheating, avoiding plagiarism. You as a teacher are thinking this is your concern. The high workload. So as a teacher, you are thinking about various things. Which application should I use? What should I do here? How can I correct this question? Okay. While the left, the one on the right is more of the student concern, because as you can see here, less opportunity to clarify assignment guidelines. Maybe the student won't have the teacher during the exam to show him or her what this question actually wants or what it exactly needs. So the guidelines here can be a bit vague for some students. Okay, now let's take a look on designing online assessment. So now we are going to have two sections in our session. The first section is about the teacher, how we can help or support the teacher to design online assessments. And the other one, how you can support your students to do their online assessments properly. So the first section here is about you as a teacher, how to design online assessments. Now, designing online assessment has 4 parts. The first part is brainstorm. And during brainstorming, you need to identify your concerns as a teacher. And you need to think of ways to translate what you used to do face-to-face with your students in their assessment into online context. And I'm going to show you how you can do that with simple checklists and tables. The next thing you need to do is familiarize. You need to familiarize yourself with the technology that you're going to use with your students. Let's say you're going to use Kahoot for the first time. How are you going to use it? So you need to familiarize yourself with it, and you need to list the possible issues that the students may face while they're doing it. And of course, you prepare yourself for it so you can support your students properly. The next part would be plan, where you need to weigh your assessment. Now, is this assessment that I'm doing on Kahoot, does it represent 10% of the overall student assessment? 20%? Define the rubric. How are you going to assess your students based on model answer, or maybe based on a certain rubric? For example, if it's a writing assignment, find the appropriate app. And again, I'm going to show you a checklist for assessment appropriacy. Is this assessment appropriate for this stage of their learning or not? The last step in the design would be the platform checklist. You need to check your platform if it's appropriate for this assignment or not. Another checklist that I'm going to share with you really soon. And what are the risks of cheating and plagiarism in that application, or using that application, or using that online assessment tools. Okay, so let's take a look at the first part, which is brainstorming. In the brainstorming, you can have your concerns identified. Use a pen or paper, or maybe on a Word document. Write your concerns about the online assessment. What do you fear in online assessment, and how to address them, how you can avoid them, how you can minimize them as much as possible. Having them written actually helps you identify them in a clearer way. This next step we said is to translate the face-to-face into online. How can you do that? This is a sample of a table. Of course, this is not all of the criteria that you can have. I have a full list. If you need it, you can simply send me an email after this session, because we don't have much time to go through all of the criteria in all of the checklists. So all of the checklists and tables that I have now, or I'm going to show you now or later on, please send me an email after we finish. If you're interested, I can send them all to you, no problem. I'm going to show you my email address at the end. So assessment method. What did you usually use with your students face-to-face as an assessment method? For example, pen and paper. Okay. Now online, what are you going to use? Okay. Can you use pen and paper? Actually, you can convert the pen and paper, for example, into, let's say, a Word document, right? So you can see here the rationale for change or no change. If it's, for example, a speaking assessment, so you are face-to-face with the student and you are checking their speaking orally. So are you going to do the same online? You may do that. So you're going to have a Zoom meeting or something with your students to assess their speaking, okay? And so on. Then you have the timeline or the due dates. Are you going to have the same due dates for your assessments when you had them face-to-face, the same as online? The feedback, how are you going to give the feedback for your students? Let's say face-to-face, you used to give it to the student orally, or you used to write it on their assignment paper. How you're going to do it now online? Submission method, how they're going to submit the assignment for you, how they used to do it face-to-face, and how they are going to do it now online. Now, there's more actually to that list, but if you need the full list, just send me an email after that session, and I'll gladly send them for you. Okay, now for the planning session or the planning part, this is another table that shows you the assessment item. What is the associated learning outcome? So let's say you're going to assess your students for the present after you taught them the present simple tense. So you need to understand, for example, what's the learning outcome of it? For example, use the tense with singular and plural objects. Now, is it going to be formative or summative assessment? It's summative. How much does it weigh from the overall assessment of the student? Let's say 10% or 20%, depending on the number of assessments that you have during the semester. What is the learning technology that you're going to use? Are you going to use Kahoot? Are you going to use Quizzes? Are you going to use Socrative? Which technology? Okay, and what will be the assessment instrument? Are you going to use a rubric, or are you going to use an answer key, for example? Okay, again, this is a big list. If you want it fully, then you can simply drop me an email. Then you can have this checklist that you do after you finish this table. Does this assessment plan address all course outcomes? Does the weighing add up to 100%? So this table can extend to a full list of all the assessment that you're going to do for your students throughout the semester. Is there a balance of formative and summative assessment? Is there a variety of assessment methods? Or you're going to simply use Quizzes for all of your assessment tools? Is it practical? Okay. Now, moving on to the assessment platform. Now, we mentioned Quizzes earlier. Now, you want to check if Quizzes is a good technology for this type of assessment. What do you do? Ask yourself these questions. Does this assessment platform meet all of the needs of my assessments? How comfortable do I feel as a teacher using the platform? And how comfortable are the students feeling using this platform? Is it free for students, or the students have to pay any fees in order to access this exam? Is it secure, or there is a chance of cheating or plagiarism? So all of these are important. Another point of security also, that it cannot share your students' information with any third parties. Okay. Now, how you can prepare your students for online assessment. So now we're done with the teacher part. Now we're going to take a look on preparing your students for online assessment. The first thing you need to do is stop your students from using pens as much as possible. Try to make them use technology. Instead of writing using a pen and paper, make them use Google Docs or Word. Instead of, for example, choosing or doing right or wrong on a piece of paper, use Kahoot or use Quizzes. So use keyboarding instead of writing. Virtual versus physical. So for example, you should use or solve the matching questions, for example, with a mouse instead of pen and paper. Practice makes perfect. If you're gonna make your exam on quizzes, then they have to learn how to use quizzes before the assessment. Don't introduce new technologies to them for the first time in their assessments. So same platform and same devices if possible. Now the big question, the big elephant in the room, as they say, preventing cheating and plagiarism. How can we do that? The first thing you can do is you can simply count on the academic integrity of your students. You can do that by making them sign e-contracts, including consequences of violations. They have to know what are the consequences of cheating or plagiarism. Exam timing. Now, you have to set a certain time. For example, this is something that I faced in my kids' schools. They used to have an open window of, let's say, 12 hours for them to do their exams. Why? Just set 3 to 4 hours for them where they can do the exam at. Make it short and frequent.
Excuse
Avoid
me.
long
Excuse me.
exams.
Ms. Isra, you have 5 more minutes, and then we'll take the questions from the audience.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
Make them short and frequent instead of long and few. The next thing is exam versions. Try to make more than one version. Of course, the teachers would feel like overwhelmed doing that, but you do that using question banks from your books. Okay, and then the authenticity. Try to use questions that target their HOTS, their higher order thinking skills, not their LOTS or lower order thinking skills. How can you do that? So instead, for example, of asking, he is or are, for example, a girl, then instead of doing that, you can simply put a photo and ask the students to write a sentence about this photo. This would be way more complicated and it would help them avoid plagiarism and would help you as well. Now, alternative ideas for online exams. You can have project-based assessment, you can have case studies and experimentation, you can have peer assessment and group work, and of course, you can have the e-portfolios and presentations. Now, project-based assessment can be done through asking your students to do certain projects. E-portfolios can be done by your students themselves. Your students themselves can do their own e-portfolios if they are old enough. I can say, for example, starting from grade 7 or higher, they can create their own e-portfolios. Peer assessment and group work. This can be done simply. For example, like here, I have some assessment tools. I think most of you know Kahoot. Google Forms, instead of doing the assessment for them, they can do self-assessment surveys, so they can check their own learning. Of course, we've mentioned quizzes. Now, YouTube can be also used for peer assessment. You can create a private channel for your students for their class. And in this channel, they can record themselves speaking and they can start assessing each other and giving feedback to each other. Mind mapping using MindMeister, for example. And the pair, now the pair here is a great tool, okay? It's called pair. It's a G Slide add-on for formative assessment. So if you're using Google Slides with your students, you can add this add-on and you can do assessment, specifically the formative one during your lessons. Now, when it comes to e-portfolios, e-portfolios is something that you can start building up with your students from the beginning of the year. This can be done either on a PowerPoint presentation, so each student has her own e-portfolio that she wants to be assessed upon with PowerPoint, and as a teacher, you will have access to this one and you can add your feedback on it. Or it can be done with some advanced students, let's say grade 9 or 10 or higher, on Google sites. Both of them are completely free. It can be done completely free without any cost. Now let's take a look at a sample of a presentation portfolio, a PowerPoint portfolio. Let me show you how it looks like. Now, if you take a look here, this is a sample of a PowerPoint portfolio. This is for a university student, okay? And here the student puts her or his personal statement, and then what kind of work that she or he has done at the university, the research that he or she has, for example, participated at, educational skills and achievements, and reflection. What are the parts that he or she have completed work. Now you can see here, case study, for example, critical thinking, research skills with the abstract of the research that he or she did, substance prevention. This was another research that he or she did. Now, another example for Google Sites would be this one. So this is a student where she actually created her own portfolio where she has written a little bit about herself. And here you can see what she has, the tabs that she can put here are completely editable. She wrote about herself as a learner. And then she wrote about her projects. Okay, so here is her personal physics project. Okay, she has done it in a form of a video. Here, for example, she has another presentation, okay, that she had for her physics or film development. This is for another
Ms. Israa, excuse
class.
me.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So
Yeah, sure. I'm just wrapping up in 1 minute. I have just one slide left.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this is an example of e-portfolios and how you can do them with your students. You don't have to do it by yourself. Your students can create them for themselves. If you want a step-by-step guide to show you how you can create e-portfolios, you can simply scan this QR code and it will show you how you can create e-portfolios for your student. This is a tool that you can use from the beginning of the semester with your students. And it will have all of the assessments that you've done for your student all year round. Okay, so it's questions time. Thank you very much for listening. Now it's your time to tell me your questions and thoughts about it.
Thank you, Ms. Israa. It was a highly informative presentation. I would request the audience to either post their questions in the chat box or they can just unmute their mic and ask their question themselves. You have approximately 3 to 4 minutes for the questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I have here Ms. Marika asking about maths. You say that maths need paper. Technology with formulas take a lot of time. Well, it doesn't have to take much time, Ms. Marika, because there are lots of apps out there for maths assessment. I can personally help you with that if you want. Just drop me an email and I can send you some amazing tools to use to assess your students in math without taking that much time. Any other questions? Now I've put my email here. Okay, so please drop me an email anytime asking for anything regarding online assessment, regarding the checklist that I've just showed you, regarding the tables, and I'd be more than happy to share them with you later. You can scan the QR codes to reach Teachogen website, or you can reach Teachogen's Facebook page, or you can reach me on LinkedIn.
Are there any more questions, ladies and gentlemen, before we wind up the session? Okay, thank you, Ms. Israa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.